If you love heartfelt stories filled with romance, emotion, and a touch of drama, you're in the right place. Grab a cozy spot where every tale is crafted to tug at your heartstrings. Don't forget to subscribe and join me for more beautiful stories every day. It was one of those slow, peaceful afternoons where time seemed to drift a little gentler. The sky outside was pale blue with thin clouds floating lazily across it. A gentle breeze swept through the neighborhood, carrying the faint scent of fresh, cut grass and the distant laughter of kids playing down the street. Inside the small two-story house, everything was hushed. No TV murmuring in the background, no clatter of dishes, no music from Alex's room upstairs, just the kind of silence that made the walls feel cozier and the air feel denser. Claire had been folding laundry in the living room earlier, sorting out the shirts, socks, and towels into neat little stacks. It was the usual Sunday ritual. Gee, like Sundays, they were her one shot in the week to unwind. After years of working, caring for her son, and ensuring the bills got paid on time, she had learned to cherish any sliver of calm. When she finished the laundry, she decided to steal a few minutes for herself. She walked toward the bathroom, tucking a strand of her light brown hair behind her ear. She wasn't planning on lingering long, just enough to wash her hands and splash some water on her face. Her reflection in the mirror looked a tad wary, but there was still a gentleness to her features. Claire had the kind of beauty that didn't demand attention. It simply lingered. Quietly, even as the years rolled by, she turned on the tap and let the cool water flow over her hands. The sound of it was soothing, a small nudge that life, for now, was peaceful. She rubbed her hands together slowly, savoring the brief moment of being utterly alone. But then 3 soft knocks shattered the quiet. They weren't loud or urgent, but gentle, almost tentative. The sound echoed inside the small bathroom, and for a second Claire froze. She glanced toward the door, her wet hands still under the running water. "Mom." It was Alex's voice, a little muffled through the door. Claire smiled faintly, expecting him to ask for something simple, maybe a snack or help locating his sneakers. "Yes, honey," she called out. There was a short pause before Alex spoke again. "There's someone here for you." Claire straightened, frowning slightly. She wasn't expecting anyone. It had been weeks since anybody dropped by without calling first. Their house wasn't exactly in the heart of town, and visitors were rare. "Who is it?" she asked. Reaching for the towel hanging beside the sink, she dried her hands slowly, waiting for his answer. Alex's voice came again. But this time it carried a different tone, something uncertain, like he wasn't sure what to make of it himself. "He says he knows you from a long time ago." Claire froze with the towel still in her hands. The words hung in the air, heavy and odd. She wasn't sure why her heartbeat had quickened so suddenly. A long time ago. That could mean many things, but the way Alex said it made her feel like it was someone significant. Someone from a chapter of her life she no longer discussed. Her mind instantly rifled through memories uninvited. She thought of old classmates, neighbors from the town she grew up in, people she once worked with. But beneath those ordinary thoughts was another feeling, one she didn't want to name just yet. She placed the towel back on the rack and stared at her own reflection again. The woman in the mirror looked the same as she had a minute ago. But Claire felt different now. Like the air around her had changed. It was strange how a few words could do that. "Did he say his name?" she asked, her voice a little quieter. "No," Alex replied. "He just smiled and said, you'd know who he was." A soft shiver ran down her spine. She didn't know why. She was suddenly nervous. After all, it was just a visitor, nothing more. But the truth was, she did know why. Deep down, there was a part of her that had always feared, and maybe even hoped that certain faces from her past might one day resurface. She ran her hands down her sides as if to smooth away the sudden tension in her body. "All right," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'll be out in a second." Alex didn't reply, but she heard his footsteps moving away from the door, each one fading into the hallway beyond. Claire stayed in the bathroom for another moment, trying to compose herself. The world outside the door felt altered now. The stillness of the house had shifted. Now it had a quiet thrum to it, as if something was waiting for her in the next room. She took a slow, steady breath and reached for the doorknob. Her hand lingered there, her mind racing with possibilities. Could be nothing. It could be someone she barely recalled. Or it could be the kind of moment that changes everything, like opening a book you thought you had closed, only to find there's another chapter waiting. With that thought, she turned the handle. The door creaked softly as it opened, and the cool air from the hallway brushed her skin. Her heart was beating a little too fast now. She realized she hadn't felt this way in years. Somewhere inside her, she knew. Whoever was standing in her hallway, waiting to see her, wasn't just anyone. And for reasons she couldn't explain, that made her both afraid and strangely hopeful. Claire stepped out of the bathroom, still holding the towel in one hand. Her bare feet made soft sounds against the wooden hallway floor. The afternoon light spilled in through the front windows, casting long, pale stripes across the carpet. She didn't see him right away. For a second, all she noticed was Alex standing there, his hands tucked into the pockets of his jeans, glancing between her and someone she couldn't yet see. Then Alex shifted slightly to the side, and there he was, Daniel Reed. For a moment, it didn't feel real. Her mind needed a few seconds to catch up with what her eyes were seeing. He was taller than she remembered, broader in the shoulders. His hair was darker now, with a few threads of silver at the temples, but the face, oh, the face was almost the same strong jaw, the same steady mouth, and those eyes, storm gray with a look in them that made her heart stumble in her chest. It had been 17 years since she last saw him. 17 years since the night he stood under the street lamp outside her old apartment and told her he had to leave. 17 years of wondering what might have happened if he had stayed. Hey, Claire, his voice was deep and familiar, the kind that seemed to carry old summers and late night talks with it. He smiled, but it was a careful smile, almost shy, as if he wasn't sure he was welcome here. Claire gripped the towel tighter in her hand, keeping her expression calm, even though she felt anything but calm inside. She didn't know what to say. The years had built a thick wall between them, and now, in just one heartbeat, it felt like the wall had cracked open. Alex looked between them again, clearly sensing that something was different about this man. His voice was light but cautious when he said, "I'll be in my room." Without waiting for an answer, he walked up the stairs, leaving Claire and Daniel alone in the hallway. The silence between them was immediate and heavy. She stood a few feet away, still unsure if she should step closer or keep her distance. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked, her tone sharper than she meant it to be. Daniel's smile faded slightly, but his gaze stayed steady. "I was driving through town," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "And I guess I just wanted to see you, to see if you're okay." Claire's chest tightened. She wanted to say, "You don't get to just show up after all these years." But the words stayed locked in her throat. Instead, she studied him. The years had left their mark on him, tiny lines around his eyes, a faint scar along his jaw. But there was still something about him that made her think of the boy she once loved. She stepped to the side, gesturing toward the living room. "Come in," she said, her voice even though her pulse was racing. Daniel walked past her, that faint scent of his cologne, different from the one she remembered, but still warm, lingered in the air. He looked around the room slowly, eyes landing on the framed photographs on the walls, Alex's school pictures, family snapshots, and a few landscapes she'd taken on weekend trips. "It's nice," he said softly. "Thanks," she replied, her voice short, not because she wanted to be rude, but because she didn't trust herself to say more. He turned back to her, his expression gentler now. "You look good, Claire." Her lips pressed into a thin line. Compliments from him felt dangerous, like a door she wasn't sure she should open. "It's been a long time," she said simply. "Too long," he answered without hesitation. The truth was, just seeing him again brought back more than she wanted to admit. The memory of nights spent in his old truck, parked under a sky full of stars, the sound of his laugh when she told him something silly, the way he used to hold her hand like he never wanted to let go. And the day he left without giving her the choice to follow him or ask him to stay. Her fingers itched to cross her arms over her chest to shield herself from the pull of those memories. But instead she stood still, letting the silence stretch between them until it felt like it might break. Daniel took a slow step closer, not close enough to invade her space, but enough for her to feel the quiet energy between them. "I'm sorry if showing up like this is wrong," he said, his voice low. "I just didn't know if I'd get another chance." Claire's heart gave a small, painful twist at his words. She didn't know what he meant by another chance. A chance for what? To talk, to see her, to start over. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, brushing against the windows. A few leaves rattled on the porch. Claire's eyes stayed on him, and for a moment she saw not the man standing in front of her, but the boy who used to run his fingers through her hair and call her sunshine when she was upset. She forced herself to look away. "You should have called," she said quietly. "I know," he replied. And just like that, the air between them was fragile again, like glass that could shatter with one wrong move. Claire wasn't sure whether to tell him to leave or to ask him to sit down. The years apart had not erased the fact that this man still had the power to stir up feelings she had worked so hard to bury. She stood there gripping the towel, feeling the weight of every moment that had passed since they last saw each other and every unspoken word between them now. They moved to the kitchen almost wordlessly, as if both of them needed a place to sit before the weight of their history crushed them. Claire reached into the cupboard and pulled out 2 mugs. Her hands felt a little unsteady, not because she didn't know where things were, but because every second Daniel stood there made her heart work harder than it should. She poured the coffee slowly, letting the rich, warm aroma fill the air. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching her like he was memorizing every small movement. When she set the mugs on the table, he sat down first, fingers curling around the warm ceramic like he needed it to steady himself. Claire sat opposite him. The table between them felt both too wide and not wide enough. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The faint ticking of the kitchen clock filled the silence. Claire kept her eyes on her coffee, watching the steam rise in delicate swirls. She didn't trust herself to meet his gaze yet. "You disappeared," she said finally, her voice calm but with an edge that made Daniel's head lower slightly. "I know." His voice was quiet, almost heavy. "I thought it was the right thing. Back then, I thought you'd have a better life without me." The Claire let out a short breath, part laugh, part disbelief. "You don't get to decide that for someone." Her words weren't angry, not exactly. They were tired, like she had carried them for years. Daniel's eyes lifted to hers, and in them she saw something she wasn't ready for: regret. Not the small, casual kind people say to smooth things over, but deep regret, the kind that sits in a person's bones. "I never stopped thinking about you, Claire," he said. Her grip tightened on the mug. She wanted to scoff, to tell him that if he'd thought of her so much, he wouldn't have left. But her voice betrayed her instead. "I never stopped wondering what would have happened if you stayed." The words hung there between them, raw and unpolished. Outside, a soft rain began to fall, tapping gently against the window, as if the sky understood this was a moment that had been waiting for years. Daniel leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on the table. "I was young and stupid," he said. "I thought I had to prove something to myself. I told myself you'd move on, that you'd find someone better." Claire's lips pressed together. "Better doesn't always mean happier," she said quietly. His eyes softened. "Were you happy?" The question felt heavier than the air around them. She thought of the years that had passed, the quiet dinners with Alex, the long days of work, the occasional dates that went nowhere, the nights she fell asleep with the TV still on because the silence was too much. "Sometimes," she answered honestly. Daniel nodded slowly, as if that was more than he expected. "I missed so much," he said. "I missed you, your life, everything." Claire studied him, searching for the man she once knew. In some ways, he was still there. In others, he was a stranger. Yet, the pull between them was undeniable, and it scared her more than she wanted to admit. "You broke my heart, Daniel," she said softly. "And I don't think you've even realized how much." His face tightened, his jaw working like he was holding back 1,000 words. "I realized," he said after a moment. "I just didn't think I deserved to come back and ask for forgiveness." The rain outside deepened, a slow, steady rhythm against the glass. Claire felt her chest ache, but not entirely from pain. There was something else there, too, something warm and dangerous. She thought about all the times she'd imagined this moment, the times she'd pictured what she would say if she ever saw him again. In her mind, she was always sharp, distant, perfectly guarded. But sitting here now, across from him, she found herself leaning slightly forward, drawn to the quiet honesty in his voice. "Why now?" she asked. Daniel's eyes searched hers. "Because I realized life doesn't wait for us to get everything right, and because I wanted to see you before too much more time passed." His words stirred something deep inside her. She didn't want them to. She wanted to protect herself, but the truth was she had never stopped caring. Not completely. That was the problem. Claire took a sip of her coffee, letting the heat ground her. "You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to be like it was," she said. "I'm not expecting that," Daniel replied. "I just wanted you to know I'm still here if you ever want to talk about anything." The offer hung in the air, tempting in a way that made her heart ache. She didn't know if she could trust him. Not yet. But there was a small, undeniable part of her that wanted to. The clock ticked softly in the background. Outside, the rain kept falling, and between them, a quiet tension grew, one made of longing, of history, and of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was still something left worth holding on to. Claire set her mug down slowly. She didn't know what she was going to do with Daniel being here. But one thing was certain: her life no longer felt as still as it had that morning. The knock on the bathroom door earlier that day had seemed like nothing, a small interruption in an otherwise quiet Sunday. But now, hours later, Claire knew it had been the start of something she couldn't quite name. It was the moment that had opened a door to her past, the moment that had let Daniel back into her life, even if only for a little while. They were still sitting at the kitchen table when Claire noticed how late the afternoon had grown. The light outside had turned soft and gray, the way it did when the clouds carried rain. She could hear the gentle tap of drops on the window, a rhythm that felt almost too calm for the way her chest was beating. Daniel set his empty coffee mug down, his hands lingering on it like he wasn't ready to let go. He looked at her with an expression that was both careful and searching. "I'm not here to mess up your life, Claire," he said quietly. I just wanted to see your face again, even if it's just this once. His words made her heart twist. She wanted to believe him, but she also knew that sometimes a single visit could be enough to turn the ground beneath your feet unsteady. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she let her eyes drift to the staircase where Alex's door was closed upstairs. The faint sound of his music seeped through the walls, reminding her that her life wasn't just her own anymore. She thought of how far she had come since Daniel left. She had built something steady, a home, a routine, a world for her and her son. And yet here was this man sitting across from her, making her remember a part of herself she had tucked away long ago. Daniel, she said finally, her voice low. Some doors stay closed for a reason. He nodded, but there was sadness in his eyes. I know. I'm not asking you to open it. I just wanted to knock one more time. It was the way he said it, gentle, almost like he was afraid to push too hard. She wanted to look away, but she didn't. She held his gaze, trying to read the man in front of her, and the years he had carried without her. He pushed his chair back and stood, moving slowly as though each motion carried weight. She rose as well, walking with him toward the front door. The hallway felt longer now, each step echoing in the quiet house. When she reached the door, she hesitated. Part of her wanted to say something that would make this moment easier, something polite, maybe even light. But the truth was, nothing about this was light. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. The soft lines around his eyes deepened when he gave her a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. Take care of yourself. Claire, she nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. You too. For a second, neither of them moved. The sound of rain outside filled the pause, the smell of wet pavement drifting in from the edges of the doorframe. He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead he stepped out onto the porch. The rush of cool air surrounded her as he turned to walk down the steps. The street was quiet except for the rain. She watched him cross the small stretch of yard, his figure becoming softer in the mist. Each step he took away from her seemed to press harder against her chest. When he reached the sidewalk, he stopped for a moment. He just stood there, his back to her, as if debating whether to turn around. But he didn't. He kept walking until his shape blurred into the grayness of the street, until she couldn't tell where the rain ended and he began. Claire stayed in the doorway longer than she meant to, her hand resting on the frame. She told herself it was just habit, that she was only making sure he had left safely. But deep down, she knew she was trying to hold on to the sight of him for just a few seconds more. Finally, she closed the door. The click of the latch seemed too final, too loud for the quiet house. She leaned against it, letting her forehead rest on the smooth wood. Her breath felt slow, heavy. Alex's music still played faintly upstairs, the same way it had before Daniel arrived. In the kitchen, the 2 coffee mugs sat on the table, steam long gone. Everything in the house looked the same as it had that morning. And yet nothing felt the same at all. Claire pushed herself away from the door and walked to the living room. She sat on the couch, curling her legs beneath her, staring at the rain sliding down the window. She tried to tell herself that Daniel's visit didn't mean anything, that it was just a moment from the past brushing against the present. But the truth was harder. Seeing him had stirred something in her, something she thought she had buried deep enough to never find again. It wasn't just the memory of what they once had, it was the way he looked at her, the way his voice softened when he said her name, the way the years between them seemed both impossibly long and frighteningly short. Her mind wandered to a dangerous question. One she didn't want to think about but couldn't stop. What if the knock on the bathroom door had come 10 years earlier? Would she have opened the door with the same caution? Or would she have stepped forward without hesitation and let him back in? The rain outside fell harder now, each drop tracing its way down the glass. She didn't know how long she sat there listening to it, thinking of him walking somewhere in the wet streets, wondering if he was thinking of her too. Somewhere upstairs, Alex laughed softly at something, probably a video on his phone. The sound grounded her. She had her life, her son, her home. And yet, a part of her heart was still out there in the rain, walking away with Daniel. She closed her eyes and took a slow breath. She didn't know if she would ever see him again, but she knew one thing for certain. This day would stay with her as clear as the knock on the bathroom door that had started it.